Hello everyone and welcome back to more Rust videos. So today we will be creating two things. First, a file for creating JWTs and decoding JWTs, and second, creating a guard to check the request that is coming has the JWT token or not. Okay, so I have divided this video in three parts. First, we'll just create the method for encoding and decoding. Second, we will create the guards, and third, we will use those two, the methods and the guard, in our application. So a note before we start: if you haven't checked out the error handling video, then please do, because I'll say like 50% of the code that we will be writing in this video will also include the things that we covered in the error handling video. So please do check that out. Okay, so first thing that we will be doing is creating a file called JWT and adding that in our mod.rs. Okay, so this JWT file will hold two functions, one for encoding and one for decoding. But before we create these methods, first we need to add a crate, a JSON Web Token crate. So let's do that first. So this is the crate we want. So if we take a look at the installation guide here, so we also need Serde. We already have this, but I don't think we have added the feature drive. So we will just copy this entire thing and paste it in our toml. So we already had this Serde, so we'll just change the version of the one we copied and remove the one we already had. We need to create one more thing, and that is a constant. Now this constant will have our secret key, or let's just say a random string that we will use as a key to generate the token. So first let's go to constants and create our token. Once we have our token in constants, we will add a random string into our env with the same key. To generate this string, I generally use this random.org and generate a few random strings and then copy 2 or 3 of them to create a single secret key. Okay, now once we have our constants and our crate, now we can start building our encode and decode methods. Okay, so let's create a claim structure. So this claim will be what we will be storing inside our token. So it should have at least two fields, that is IAT, which stores the time at which this token was created, EXP, which stores the expiry, when the token will expire, and we can add other fields as well. So I'll just add one more, email, just to verify which user this is. Now we will need to add a few traits to this. Let's say I think we will be using both serialize and deserialize. Once our structure is ready, let's start with encode method. So the return type should be string or status code. Status code will be in the case if we get an error, and string will be if we don't get any error. Now this email that we require in our claims, we will get that from the user, so we'll take it as a parameter inside our encode JWT method. And now first let's create a variable called now. This will store the current time. Then let's create another variable called expire, or anything you want, but that will basically hold the duration after which the token will expire. Finally, we create our claim. Okay, so it's saying that we can't directly convert our duration or our date time into usize. So let's first convert it to a timestamp and then to usize. Finally, we will create our token, but let's take first our secret from the env, and then we'll have every variable we need to create the token. We need to go to utils, constants, and then finally to token. And we'll clone this constant in our secret variable. Finally, we have everything we need for creating the token. So let's just return the token directly. So we'll do return encode. This encode method will get from our JSON Web Token library. It takes three parameters: headers, claims, and key. So header, we don't really need any extra header, so we'll just do header and default. So it takes okay. So after header we have our claims, and then we have our secret key. So first let's give the secret key, then we'll do the claims, because we just need to change the claims to claim. Okay, so it wants to first take claims. Okay, let's just fix claim first. And finally it says we need encoding key, and we found string. Okay, so we need to generate the encoding key from this secret. So let's put this inside our encoding string. Finally, it says that the type expected was and u8, and it got a string. So we'll change it to a reference. Okay, now we have another error. It says type mismatch. Okay, so it basically says our return type is not matching. So we just need to get the token from this encoding. So first what we do is we map error so that we get the result inside from our result, and then let's just return a simple error code here. So all these methods we will be using this inside our other methods of our handlers. So that's why I'm not using API error here. But we will be using API error in the handlers. Okay, so everything looks good, and our encode method is ready. So let's move to our decode method. So our decode method will also take a string as a parameter, and the return type will be slightly different. So the return will be a result, but instead of returning a string, it will return a token data claim. And for error, it will be the same status code. So we will need our secret to decode. So let's get our secret string first. Then let's decode our JWT. So for decoding, we have our decode method from the JSON Web Token crate. And it also takes three parameters: token, key, and validation. So for token, we have our JWT, and for key, we have our secret key. And for validation, we don't really need much validation here. After JWT and decoding key, we need to set our validation. We don't really need anything for validation for now. We can add things later, but let's just give a default validation here. Finally, we need to map our error, and that's all. Okay, so we need to give the type of variable here because it is not able to take our claims for token data type. So it's just showing unknown there. So let's set the return type manually. Okay, now our return type looks good. So let's just return this variable, rest variable, and we should be good. Okay, so this method also looks good, and I think that's all for this method. So with this, we have created our encoding and decoding. Now let's move to the next part, that is the guards. Okay, so let's create a file called guard.rs in our utils. This will hold our guard method. Let's add it to our mod.rs. Okay, so let's create a async function called guard. This method will be using as a middleware, and to check that the token that user is sending for all the requests that needs authentication is valid or not. So it should be of a generic type, so that any type of request it can handle, and it will take two variables as parameter. First as request, we will keep it mutable, and the next one is next, so that will be of type next. As for return type, the return type will be response or an error. Okay, so let's first get the token from our headers. To get that, we'll use request.headers, and from request headers we'll take type get, and from that we'll take the bearer token. Okay, so to handle our error, we'll make an okay or, and if we don't get the token, then we'll throw an error. After okay or, we'll take the token from the result and we'll convert it to owned. Okay, so to get rid of this error, let's first just return the response which it wants, and then we'll do the processing in between. Okay, now let's get our claim from our token. For that, we had created a decode JWT. Okay, so we have finally, after mapping the error, token data claims. From this, we just need our claim, so we'll do dot claim. Okay, so one thing additionally I like to do is, once we get the token and we have the email, I like to make a DB request and fetch the details of the user and put them inside a variable and share it across the router, so that in 90% of the cases, if we have authenticated the user, that means we need the user's ID or email at least to do some processing. So to make that easier, I just create a variable, store the information of the user in that variable and share it across the routing. So let's do that. First, let's create our DB. Let's get our DB connection from extensions. Then we'll do a DB request to get the user data, and then we'll share that data across the routes. Let's create a variable called identity. Now this variable will hold the value for the user data. Okay, so now we have our identity variable that has the user data. Next, what we need to do is we need to add it to our layers as an extension so that we can access it in any of the user routes. For that, we'll do a request extension mute, and then we do insert identity. And I think that should be all for the guard. So our guard is also ready. Finally, we move to our last part of this video so that we can access it in any of the user routes. For that, we'll do a request extension mute, and then we do insert identity. And I think that should be all for the guard. So our guard is also ready. Finally, we move to our last part of this video. Okay, so let's go to our auth handler, because the token we will be creating will be at our login time. So when the login request has come, and the return type will change here because we won't be returning a user model. So let's create a new user model. We just need to return a token here. And let's call this login user response model. We don't need email, we don't need password. We just need a token of type string. Okay, now here let's change the return type from JSON user model to JSON user login user response model. And let's change this data variable also. We only need token here, nothing else. So let's remove everything that we don't need. And to get the token, we will be calling our encode method. So let's create a variable called token, and let's store the encoded JWT here. All we need to do is send the user email once we have verified that the credential that user has provided are genuine. Then all we need to do is encode the JWT, and we will need to map the error. Now we can pass this token for the token there. Okay, so now it says that we don't really need to do token colon token because the variable name is same, so it will take it directly. So actually we don't even need to store this inside the variable, we can just return it directly. Okay, now everything looks good, and I think okay, so now our token will be sent at the login time, and we will be able to use that for authentication. Okay, so let's test it out. Let's do a login. First we need to run our server. Okay, it says not found. This is probably because the email is incorrect. Okay, so now you can see we are getting the token. Let's copy this token and go to our parent, and For that parent, we'll set authentication and we'll provide the bearer token there, so that all of our requests can inherit from it. Okay, so now all we need to do is implement the guard. Actually, we have implemented the guard. All we need to do is use that guard. So let's go to our main.rs. Okay, so one thing we need to keep in mind is the place where we use that guard, every request above that or every router above that will be following that guard. So we don't need our authentication routes to follow that guard. We only need our user routes to follow that guard. So let's replace their positions, put the user routes above, and then in between the user routes and auth routes, place our guard. To place the guard, we'll create a route layer and we'll place it as a middleware from a function. And that's all. Now our guard is also ready. So let's just send this all request and take a look if the guard is working or not. So here you can see no auth token found. We're getting the error for the token because we haven't sent any token. So let's just change the authentication of this request and inherit from the parent and send it again. Now you can see we are getting the data. So this will be implemented on all the user routes, as our user router is above the route layer where we have implemented the guard. So all our routes inside our user routers are protected now. So that's all for this video. If you learned something or enjoyed this video, then please give a thumbs up. It helps us to grow, and do subscribe.